and I just don't know how many of the progressive voters really thought this is what they were voting for when they were voting for Mark Carney. Because normally normally people on the left of politics go around before elections telling everybody how public services won't be protected, they'll be cut to the bone by the wicked evil Tories. Whereas you've now got a liberal progressive government that's going to be reducing budgets for potentially very significantly. Now, I happen to think that in lots of cases that has to happen because you just look at the public finances. However, if this gets termed a kind of austerity budget and a cuts budget, I don't know. I think it's a danger for the Liberals here.
What
Holly,
will
I'm
be
curious when
happening
you
in
were
the
door knocking,
background?
though.
Sorry, go.
Sorry?
Go on. You go.
No, sorry, we were asking what were you going to say, Holly?
No, I was just going to ask, what will be happening in the background between various different interested parties? Will there be negotiation at this point or after it's all been, before today, or after everything's been announced? How do they get everyone in line to vote it through?
Well, I think at the moment, I think everybody thinks that because they don't have a majority, but I don't think there's a single party that thinks having an election is to their advantage at the moment. Right. And if there was, I heard this the other day, this would be the shortest period in Canadian history between two elections, and the polling shows that the overwhelming majority of the public do not want an election. So I think from what we understand is, there are enough opposition MPs who will be absent, unavailable, whatever, to make sure this goes through. That seems to be where the chatter is, because it doesn't really seem to be in anybody's interest to have an election at the moment, because the polls are so tight still. We could well go to the polls and end up delivering a very similar result. And would Canadians really... I think Canadians might well blame whoever is seen as causing that election. So I don't know. So I think it feels like it's going to go through. But I suppose there's one difference here, which for British listeners might be a bit interesting, is because it's the federal government, and the federal government doesn't provide directly health services, doesn't provide education and schools. Those lie with the provinces. Now, although there are transfers and there are payments that go from the federal government to the provinces for health and all sorts of things, I wonder then if the health system, which is already in a pretty bad shape here, who gets the blame if there are other cuts to that? Is it the federal government, or do the provinces get the blame? So in the UK, it was very easy, particularly in England, right, to blame the national government for anything that went wrong in the health system or the education system or policing, because those were funded by central government in England. And those were services people see and use every day. With the federal government, it's a bit more because of the provincial structure. So maybe they'll get away with it in a way that you wouldn't do necessarily.
I'm not sure that they will necessarily. I mean, it's only one poll, but David Coletto was out with some polling this morning or yesterday, David Coletto being one of the more reputable pollsters that we have in this country. And his most recent polling found that most Canadians want some type of steady as she goes treatment to the budget. They don't want anything overly drastic. They want certainty more than they want uncertainty, which I think there's a bit of conflict there between voters' expectations and what needs to happen to the fiscal framework to turn this thing around. So I do worry on behalf of the current government whether expectations management isn't quite where it needs to be if there are going to be expenditure and massive cuts like that's been floated about.
And then if going on in the background as well, the elbows up doesn't secure a deal with the US, it's kind of like, how much runway does the Liberal government really have if you're seeing cuts, public services being fired at a time when Canadian unemployment's already going up, and if the government's actions are putting more people on the dole, and you're seeing, services reduced and all these stories about, people on, protesting about reductions, and you haven't sorted out the US stuff, which is, we were electing a grown up to do that. Difficult, though, I think that would be for anybody, in fairness to Mark Carney. I don't know, maybe, which might well be why, if you're a Conservative, you're the opposition, you kind of don't want an election right now, because let this all play out. And then this time next year, when they'll have to go through another budget and they'll have to wear the results of this budget and presumably the continued failure with the Trump administration, maybe that's when you want an election. So
And I think that's
Also,
where the interesting,
let them be the ones to do it. If really hard
yeah,
decisions have to be made and cuts have to be made, let them do it on their watch rather than picking up the baton and having to do it yourself, I guess.
Yeah, this is the thing, isn't it? Do you really want to be the guys in power at the moment anywhere? Because it's so impossible to govern anywhere. It's the circumstances are so awful. It's like, I mean, I have to say, even though I obviously didn't stand in 2024, there was a bit of me
And you're
that was
losing.
like,
I know, Andrew, you lost your seat in 2024. I've read it on,
well,
what's it called,
that's what it says on
Grokpedia or
Grokpedia.
Grokpedia?
But some people are cruel. No, but it's like, you know, I wouldn't have been there anyway, but like it was still a kind of, there was that sort of relief of like, oh, thank goodness, because, you know, well, I don't think that now because the new government doesn't seem to have done a very good job of things, but it's still that thing of like, you know, at the moment, just being in government anywhere is just a like shit show, right? Because you've got all these different forces and it just seems nowhere's governable at the moment.